PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Olympiad round 2, and I'd like to take a look at what's happening with the two players playing for the world title in November. So we've got Domaraju Gukesh obviously playing for India and Ding Liren playing for China. So first of all, Vignir Stefansson playing for Iceland and playing white here against Gukesh. Let's see how Gukesh is doing, what kind of form he's in coming up to the World Championship match. Stefansson, I should say, I think he's 21 years old. He has 3 years on Gukesh, of course, who's only 18. And Gukesh plays a bit of a slice serve with h6. Well, you know what I think about these funny little pawn moves at the side of the board. He's just trying to get his opponent away from sort of recognised theory, but it's not a terrifying move, h6. And Stefansson very quickly, well, I say very quickly, after 5 minutes thought, played g3. And now we go into a kind of Catalan. So a check on b4, the bishop drops back. That's to commit the bishop on to d2, which perhaps isn't the best square, but this is fine. And both sides castle and d5. So we're in a closed Catalan where black has played this move h6 very early, but, well, it's not a terrible move. It's a pretty normal position. And when the position is more or less closed, then in fact, this doesn't have too much bearing on the position. Bishop f4, so the bishop activates. a5, it's all pretty normal stuff. And knight c3. So it's possible for black to play with b6 here, but Gukesh takes the pawn on c4. So it's actually quite a well-known way of playing the position. Now it's possible for white to recover that pawn with knight d2 because b5 just isn't on in this position because of the Catalan bishop striking on c6. So knight d5. This is why black is doing this. Normally you wouldn't want to give up your centre like this when it brings the knight to a very good square, but the point is that black has time to take off that important bishop. And, well, it's debatable. Does this weaken white's king, or does this give white greater control in the centre with those two pawns? Because that is quite a nice clump of pawns there. But as I said, it's quite a well-known position. Thing is, I mean, I've played both sides of this position. And with white, it's really nice to have this space advantage. You know, it's a big clamp on the position. Beautiful bishop as well. With black, what you're hoping is that at some point, you're going to be able to open up white's king. Now, it's difficult to see how you're going to achieve that. But let's see in this game. Knight e5, so great position for the knight. And bishop d7. Of course, this is the problem piece in the Catalan for black. I mean, compare these two bishops. This bishop seems to be going nowhere. I mean, this looks pitiful. Bishop on e8. But I have to repeat those words of the Soviet Grandmaster Eddie Gufeld, who said, even the worst bishop in the world is better than the best knight. And this is an asset for black, those two bishops. Now, at the moment, it's hard to say that, for example, that bishop on e8 is stronger than that beautiful knight on e5. But let's see what happens. It is a long-term asset if you play it right. King h1. Well, that looks pretty sensible because there's a semi-open g-file and, well, white could even get some attack down there. rook c8. Well, that's actually quite an important move, because if white throws too many pieces towards the king side, then black will be able to break with c5. So white just has to keep an eye on that. So rook d1, always good to put a rook opposite the queen. Bishop d6 after a big think. So why bishop d6? Well, it's because it just gives the queen a better square. So the queen steps out of the d file, so it's a lot safer on e7. Bishop is also nicely placed on d6 too. Just keeping an eye on that knight. And knight a4 played. So clearly Stefansson was concerned that c5 could happen at some point. Just, black starts to break out. I mean, for example, after knight e4, then c5 certainly looks like a very legitimate move. And particularly gaining tempo against the queen, but black is breaking out there. So knight a4 played. I understand that move, just sort of clamping down on the c5 square. Nevertheless, c5 is actually still possible in that position. But after this, well, odds on it would be a draw by repetition. Anyway, rook c7 played. And that's a very canny move, as we're going to see. Knight d3, queen d8. Oh, strange kind of shuffling going on now. Knight d5, a3. And now f6. Ah, okay. Now things are kind of coming together. With this rook looking along the 7th rank. The f-pawn covers the e5 square, and this bishop, a window has opened on this side of the board. Well, it can't pop out yet, those squares are covered, but let's just keep that in mind. Queen d2, g5. So this is what Gukesh has been building up to. So that rook is about to swing across to g7. Wow, it's amazing how Gukesh has somehow managed to get some initiative in this position. But it's at the cost of a pawn. So this is really daring play. He's really going for it. Now, if pawn takes pawn, this would be a terrible mistake, because after e4, the knight has to go back. You can see that just blocks out the bishop, and in fact, well, e5 is actually winning a piece. So instead, bishop g6, there we go. This bishop finds a really nice diagonal. Now in this case, e4 would be met by knight takes. That's a completely different scenario, because of course the bishop is just fantastic here. Instead of a kind of dead point with a pawn there, the bishop is wonderful. So queen d2 protects the knight. Queen d8, so the queen is just shuffling towards the king side. Well, that's a better arrow. Knight c5. Okay, trying to get back into the game. Rook g7. There we are. The rook swings across. And it's quite clear that black has quite some attack here. Things are building very nicely. Black is a pawn down though. And at the moment, there's no clear way through. Rook e1. So once again, if this is taken, then e4. And that's really nasty for black, because that just shuts off the bishop. And yeah, white, the knight has to fall back. Possibly e5 is coming. So bishop b8. Okay, just marking time for the moment. And maybe preempting an e4, e5 as well. Now, if pawn takes pawn here, pawn takes, disaster. Then you can see the rook and the bishop would combine to hit h2. So white has to be careful. There's a strange tension here in the position. Queen d2 played. Bishop h7. Okay, that unmasks the rooks. But at the moment, there's nothing doing. b6 pushes the knight back. Once again, pawn takes pawn, not advisable, because after this, e4, this is a dead point, and this bishop is locked out of the game. Not good. But Gukesh played g4. Good move. I mean, it looks funny to sort of bypass this pawn. You know, is the bishop shut out of the game? But, okay, first of all, bishop takes is no good because of bishop takes knight. So the queen is overloaded. Queen takes bishop, rook takes bishop. So the bishop retreats. And queen h5. So there we are. The queen is basically heading in the right direction. I mean, there are other ways to play. You could just push with h5 here. Anyway, queen h5 feels right. But at the moment, there's still no clear way forward for black. I mean, maybe Gukesh was entertaining ideas of queen h4, maybe rook g5 to h5. Remember, there would be a pin there. So that's possible, queen h4. Anyway, queen d2 played. This was definitely a mistake because it allows black to break with g3. In this position, there's still a pin here. Well, queen h4 would be coming, but yeah, at the moment. But queen d2, definitely a mistake, because after g3, you can see those rooks are back in the game. And after this, actually, Stefansson just falls apart. This is really, really nasty. Let me just give you a quick example. In the game, e4 was played. If queen e2, it's possible to take here and play bishop e4. Doesn't matter about the queen. You'll get that one back. That's a check. Let's go back. So, e4 played. Now, perhaps Stefansson was hoping to block this one out, but rook g4. Well, this is really, really nasty. So there's potential to swing over here. This pawn is attacked, and now the bishop is back in the game. Well, this is an absolute object lesson in the power of the two bishops. If pawn takes knight, then rook takes d3. And bishop takes f4. Wow. Breaking in. So queen e2 played. Knight takes. Again, beautiful bishop. Bishop f3. And that was the end of the game after rook takes bishop. If queen takes, then queen h2 is mate. And if rook takes, well, you could just take here and black is a piece up. Or you could be really flashy and take that one. And then you do that. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one on the board. Two bishops. Who'd have imagined way back here, when those bishops were standing on e8 and e7, that you could end up with that kind of position. There we go. Two bishops. If you handle them carefully, they can be a real asset. But what I liked about Gukesh's play in that game was that he wasn't afraid to hold the tension. And, you know, that was really in the balance, that game. He held his nerve, and finally, you know, his opponent made a big mistake and he crashed through with g3. Now you contrast that with how Ding is playing at the moment. So Ding didn't play in the first round. He played again in the match China against Chile, and his opponent is Enriquez Viagra, 2600 player, so a decent player. And it was Aristaraza And they reached this position. So Ding is playing white. Quite unclear. Very nice for black to have this pawn here, of course. You know, there's issues with the king. But very unclear position. Ding played f takes e6. And he offered a draw which was accepted. Now, you contrast that with Ding playing it very safe and not wanting to risk matters, with Gukesh really going for it. So, well, this is on the basis of one game, but at the moment it seems like Ding isn't quite back. You know, he doesn't quite trust himself. But let's see. I'll keep you up to date with their results. Best finish of the day. Let me show you the finish of the game. Forzi against Abdusattorov. So this is Egypt against Uzbekistan. Abdusattorov playing black. Forzi took on e5. I mean, he's got a difficult position already. A check. Rook d8, pushing the queen away. Of course, it needs to keep hold of this rook. So queen e2, bishop h3. Okay, that's an obvious one. If it's taken, then queen takes would be mate. Knight f3, queen g3, threatening queen g2. Pawn takes. And now the final move, rook d2. What a splendid finish. So if knight takes, queen h3 is mate. And if queen d2, queen f3. And that's also checkmate. Beautiful stuff from Noribek Abdusattorov. So that's just round 2 in the Olympiad, very early stages. I'll be keeping you up to date with events and I'll report back soon. Thanks for watching.